And I remember asking her, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she said, well, I want to be a ninja, princess, astronaut. And I said to myself, she really thinks she can have it all.
Why not?
And she can. And for some reason, when we get older, we think that we can only be one thing. And what you're saying is so true. You know, she wants to be a myriad of things, and she's going to accomplish whatever she wants to do because she's such a smart kid. But I think it's so cool how at a young age, you have this mind of I can do everything. And it's sad that over time that kind of minimizes. But I always think about that when I think, you know, what you said right now is you really can do a lot more than you think you can. I always think about Galgul, and she always tells me, she's like, I want to be a princess, ninja, astronaut. And I say, I can do that too. I can be in the finance sector and a professor and a teacher. And so it's kind of cool.
I totally think you can.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Yael Hadass from the Rafael Recanati International School at Reichman University. Welcome to the new episode in our podcast, The Future Economist, where we discuss education, economics education per se, and what do economists do. Today, I'm very happy to host a first-year student, El-ly Namatinia, at the Business Administration and Economics double major degree at the Rafael Recanati International School at Reichman University. Welcome, El-ly.
Hi, Yael. How are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming. I'm so excited. This podcast is really wonderful because it gave me a lot of opportunity to talk more, I would say more time, one-on-one with my students. And I think I learn just as much as our listeners.
How fun.
So it is a lot of fun. So let's start, El-ly, with the first question I always love to ask people. Who are you? How did you come here?
So I'm El-ly Namatinia. I grew up all over the world. And at some point, I felt that it was time to come to Israel to join the military. So I came to Israel. I did a small ulpan just to work on my Hebrew. I joined the military. I was a madrichat shirion, a tank instructor, which was very cool. I finished the military, and I've always loved school, so I wanted to immediately start university. I came to Reichman, and here I am.
Excellent. But, when you start with such an opening, you have to explain what do you mean by you grew all over the world.
Right.
People do not just grow all over the world. Please tell us.
So I was born in Israel. I'm originally from a place called Kochavi Tzurigal, which is next to Kfar Saba. And when I was 5, my family and I, we moved to India, New Delhi. And I was there for 4 years at an American school.
What brought your family to New Delhi?
My dad works in high tech. So he was a manager at his company, and they moved him to New Delhi to be a part of the Indian part of the program. Of the company. And then I was there for 4 years. From there, I moved to China, Beijing, for 2 years, which was wonderful.
Again, because of your father's work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And then lastly, I moved to Thailand, Bangkok, Thailand.
Wow.
And I was there for 7 years.
Oh my goodness.
At an international school. Zeu. And then
Were
I
you
finished.
Always in international schools?
Yes.
All your education is like in English?
Yes.
Or also in local languages?
No, all in English, international schools. In India, it was an American school because it was right next to the American embassy. So that's the school that they had in India. And then both in Beijing and in Bangkok, it was an international school. Really, really amazing places.
Wow. You have to tell us about, it's not so easy to children to transfer, even between cities.
Yeah.
And just, to transfer first like completely different cultures. And also, did you also had an opportunity to learn the local languages?
Yes. So when I was in Beijing, I learned a little bit of Mandarin. And then when I continued to move and I moved to Bangkok, my parents wanted me to keep learning Mandarin. So I kept learning Mandarin in Bangkok. My Mandarin's not as good as it used to be, but I do have a little bit of a basis. And then I also learned Spanish in Thailand just to learn another language. So that's in terms of languages. And in terms of moving, I think that for students who moved so much, you don't really know anything else. Because also all the community around me, they were all also international students. So we all kind of came from a place of moving and leaving and coming and leaving. So I don't really know anything else. I don't think it was hard on me just because my community was the same as me. I think had I have moved from country to country where the high schools or the schools themselves were stagnant and there wasn't as much movement, it would have been much harder. But because I was already so used to it and everyone around me was doing the same thing, it just felt normal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that it's probably really developed your ability to sort of like connect with people really quickly.
Yeah. I had to learn very quickly how to turn a house into a home. So even coming to Israel, I think a lot of people had a really hard time stabilizing in a new environment. And I very quickly knew how to turn Israel into my new home. So that's something that I learned from moving around so much.
So can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by turning a house to a home?
I think adapting to a new environment is so important while staying true to yourself. So I think that's something that you have to learn to do because it's very hard to know where you have to become your own person and kind of adapt to the new environment, whether it's culturally or whether it's in terms of language, and where to stay true to yourself and who you are. So for example, moving from Beijing to Thailand, I was always a sports kid growing up. And then when I moved to Thailand, something kind of changed and I became much more academic centered. And I think that was a true change in me in terms of how I acted and what I liked. But it wasn't necessarily, it was good because it was because of the environment, but I was also staying true to myself. I wasn't becoming a different person because all of a sudden I needed to adapt. It was because I'd kind of always been that person. And being in Thailand just allowed me to let that be a bigger aspect of my life than it was previously, which I think is very cool. I've kind of lived many different lives and many different versions of El-ly because of moving around so often.
That's what when you talk about it, I think about, especially for young people, sort of finding your own self is sort of like a one-time thing. It's sort of like it takes you the whole, years to sort of look for it and find it or whatever. It's a one-time thing. At the end you're sort of like, okay, this is me, this is who I am.
Yeah.
But for you it seems to me like, okay, this is who is me at the new environment. It's sort of like you have to find, like, as you said, many different El-lys. It sounds to me so hard.
It was hard, but it was also so natural. Mm-hmm. I didn't really know anything else. I also think my brother and sister, they developed and changed based on the environment. And I think you have to, especially in a globalized world where we are becoming so, we're sponges. We're sponges of culture and we're sponges of language and we're sponges of environment, and we're always changing our environment. And our environment is always changing as well. You have to learn how to be adaptive. So that's what I had to do. And I genuinely thank my parents so much for allowing us to have these opportunities, because for them, culture and education and environment was everything. They did everything they could to make sure that these transitions were as smooth as possible, and that they also allowed us to change within these environments. So it's super cool. Thank you to mom and dad for sure.
Wow, I'm so impressed that they could do that and you thrived in it, because I don't think anybody can take it for granted. I think for many children, when they move a lot, they have some, hardships, feeling of being uprooted. And for you, it sounds like you took only the good side of it. And that also leads me to think about how you integrated in the Israeli environment, because you came to the army. And Israel is actually characterized by the fact that people are living here. It's in the sense that, with the same people for many years. It's a small country. So even when you move, you are able to maintain your connections, and you have the family are very, very integrated, and people see their family every week, unlike, I would say, American families who see, the distances are so vast that they go to see each other in Christmas and in Thanksgiving, and that's it. So you come, as this person who is so, used to being changing all the time, to a very, I would say, much more stagnant society.
Yes.
So how would you even get in?
Wow, I could talk about my army experience for hours. I think most people who came from outside of Israel and came into Israel, their army experience was very defining in who they are now. I had a really hard time at the beginning, because one of the ways in which Israelis become friends is there's always some mutual thing they all know about, right? So I actually started writing a short story about this because I had to reflect on my army experience. And I said, I remember one of the first days we were all sitting in the cafeteria, and they were talking about some story of Noah Kirel and her boyfriend and how they broke up. And I sat there and I didn't understand. I didn't know who Noah Kiril was. I didn't even understand they were talking about a person. And I felt so out because I grew up in an international society. So there was never so much a topic of one country. It was international topics that everyone kind of knew about. And all of a sudden we were talking about something that was within Israel that I had no idea about. And also everybody kind of knew each other. So it was, oh, I know this person, which you know, and you form a friendship through that. And I didn't know anyone. So at first it was really hard to integrate. But I also think Israelis are so good at, because everyone's at some point an immigrant here for the most part, they want to bring you in. Israel is such a family. I remember I think I was in the army for Passover because I drafted in March. And everyone was like, come to my house. My parents want you at our house. It was so inviting. So I think it's a dichotomy. It's both parts. On one hand, everyone knows each other and it's really hard to integrate. On the other hand, everybody wants to be friends with you because you're different and because you're a lone soldier and because they want you to feel included. So it took me a while, and now my best friend, one of my closest friends, is from the army, and I'm still in contact with her even a year later. So I think that's really cool.
So you passed even that obstacle.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Took a while, but I did.
It's interesting that you said that this took a while. I would say, going to Beijing and going to Thailand is much harder, but but it's your experience. So tell me, so you had all these amazing experiences and you chose business administration and economics. And the question is why?
Yeah. Okay, there's a few aspects to this. I think the first aspect is I was always a quantitative and qualitative person. I think in high school, a lot of people either gravitated towards math and sciences or gravitated towards English and the humanities. And I was always somewhere in between. In high school, I took higher level economics and chemistry, which is very scientific and mathematic. And I was captain of my debate team, and I was taking geography. So what I found was that economics was the perfect mix of humanities and of math. It was both qualitative and quantitative. And I love that because I was able to integrate two parts of who I was into one. That's the first thing. And the second thing, if we're already talking about education, my high school economics teacher made me fall in love with the subject. And I think that's why we'll get into it later, I'm sure. But in that regards, I started economics just because he was also my debate coach. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And he said, hey, I think this will be an interesting place for you. You should come. You should come and do the class. Worst case, you won't like it. Maybe you'll be able to change, but you should do it. And I fell in love with economics because of him. I attribute it to him completely. So I think in a weird way, my mom and I would always talk about this, is because I liked both the quantitative and the qualitative, I really could have been pulled any path. If I had an amazing government teacher, which I did, but if that teacher had or chemistry or whatever, I could have been pulled any way. But because of my teacher in economics and because of the great connection that we had and how much he made me fall in love with economics, I decided to do that. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
it
is.
How much our lives are shaped by the teachers that we have at a pretty young age.
Yeah, I must say, this is what I love about being a teacher.
Yeah.
You feel like you have a lot of influence on how I told you in class, on young minds.
Yeah, you do.
So, but, it's not only the personality. What do you like in economics, like in specific? Because the interesting thing is that I discovered people do not know what is economics.
Yeah.
They do not, if you ask people to tell me what is economics, they would not, the answers I would get would be, it's about money, it's about interest rate, and it's so much more than that.
Well, that's what I thought at first when I started. So I did the IB program, and one of the options was higher level economics. And when my debate coach proposed it to me, I kind of thought to myself, I've never really been that interested in money. It doesn't really interest me. I'm much more creative. This is not for me. But he really pushed me. He said, I really think this is for you. And I think what people don't realize about economics is that it encompasses every aspect of our life, from what decisions we make to how we deal with situations. And that's why I fell in love with economics, not because of the money aspect, but because there is a level of analysis that I don't think happens in many other subjects, right? You start with something quantitative. You start with numbers and diagrams. And from that, you make a story. And you problem solve. And I think that's what's so beautiful about economics. And that's why I love economics. And I particularly in high school got into the behavioral economics aspect of economics as well, because I was really interested in how do you take the quantitative again and turn it into something more creative? So yeah, I think economics is, you said at the first semester, I remember you said it's about decision making.
Yes.
And it's so true. That's all it's about. Money is part of it. Interest rates are part of it. Everything's a part of it, but it's not the main story. And I think that is so cool. Taking analysis and problem solving. So that's what I love about economics.
Well, I totally feel the same, but I need you to sort of give an example. Because it's sort of like, our listeners do not know it as me and you.
Okay.
So, yes.
So when I was studying micro and macro in high school, we would always have to draw graphs of what was happening. Demand was shifting, supply was shifting. For example, rent control, right? That's something that everyone, an ordinary person, knows about. So you draw this graph and you see what happens in terms of quantity. You see what happens in terms of prices when rent control happens. But then the question is, what do we do with that? How do we solve that problem? What are the consequences of doing this? And I think that's kind of the idea, is you're starting with this diagram, with this idea, with these numbers, with these shifts, and then you're telling a story of how does this affect people, which is so important in our everyday life. How does this policy affect everyday people? What can we do to solve it? Are there better ways of doing what we want? Are there better ways of solving the problem that we want to solve, right? Because this starts from a problem. That's a great example I think I can give of how
the problem is high real estate prices. Right. So we have high real estate prices. By the way, this is a very pressing problem today in Israel.
In Israel, yeah.
And also in other Western countries, I would say. But in Israel, it's like
totally.
Become, when I look at real estate prices, I just, I feel like the whole world got berserk. It's sort of like how many salaries you need to pay it's insane.
It's insane.
And then I think to follow on what you said, rent control sounds to be like, oh, this is cool. Maybe we can just, the government can stop this and help people. But no, there are consequences to this stop. And the consequences of, for instance, is that it would lower incentives of homeowners to renovate. And then people would just live in much, lower level houses. Maybe people would not want to buy new houses. There are a lot of side effects to this policy that, economics allow you to analyze, whereas when you don't have the economic background, you can completely miss.
Right, totally.
It would why there's a problem. It's great that the government would just, stop this.
Well, I remember when learning economics, even in your class, there were consequences of things I didn't even realize exist. I never even thought about which stakeholders are affected by certain things that you may do to the economy. And I think, going back as a humanities person in the core, people is what matters, and how certain things affect people, for me, is what matters. And so if economics is a tool for me to decide and understand how certain things can affect people, then I'm sold, then I'm happy. And that's a great example.
So I must tell you that we have many economists. People go to economics, and that's the beauty of the profession, if you ask me, from many different sides and many different ambitions. And, some people would tell you, I went to study economics to make money. Because we do think that economics is about money. So if we're going to go, I remember even myself when I was a student, all my classmates told me how they're going to be millionaires. And I was like, why do you think that what we learn here is exactly going to make a millionaire? So there are people who go from that aspect. And my question is, since you describe yourself as such an interdisciplinary person, what is your motivation? What would be your dream job? What would be something you want to find yourself do?
So actually, this is funny because I was talking to my cousin about this. We were recently on a road trip, and he started working now at 22, real job, like a real adult job. And he was saying that one of the hardest things for him to navigate is, where do I allow my ego, to what aspect and to what extent do I allow my ego to be a part of the job that I do, and to what extent do I want my happiness to be a part of the job that I do? Which is, for me, being in this program has been kind of this tightrope that I have to decide. Because on one hand, making money is important. And I think looking at that and saying it's not important is not true. It is important. If you want to raise a family, if you want to give your kids opportunities like my parents gave me, money is important. Money is power. On the other hand, I've always loved education. So my dream was always to be either an international school teacher and travel around the world, or to be a professor and get to do research and teaching. And then it's kind of I go back and forth of, where can I find the perfect mix of both, where I will be satisfied in both aspects. So in terms of what my dream is, it changes all the time, right? Like recently we've been learning finance, and I find finance fascinating. So sometimes I wake up and I say, I would love to be in the financial sector. In other days, I wake up and I think to myself, I would love to do research in behavioral economics. I think it's so fascinating. In another day, I wake up and I say, I would love my kids to have the environment and the changes that I had growing up, moving from place to place. So I would love to be an international school teacher. It changes all the time.
Mm-hmm.
My mom likes to tell me, there's a song, it goes, life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. Whenever my mom tells me this, I remember, just keep studying, keep learning. That's all I need. As long as I'm constantly stimulated with education and I'm constantly learning, from there, life will make plans for me. You know, my parents, they were on their honeymoon, part of their honeymoon in Thailand.
Mm-hmm.
And they tell me there was no part of that honeymoon where we thought maybe we would live here eventually. And look what happened. So you never know.
Yeah, I agree with you. By the way, the good news that I can give you like a glimpse from the future, because I have much a bigger, longer perspective than you, is that you can actually do all of it. You can actually do all of it. That's the beauty of it. You can, start in finance, go in the banking sector for several years, or financial. Now that there's fintech, there's so many, things you can do with finance. Then you can go and do your PhD and, do a research career. You can actually do so many things. And the beauty is that I think life are long, and I think there's a lot of value to diversity and to many experiences.
Right.
I think people, with more work experience are better researchers. They just, have been exposed to many, problems that are worth researching. So I definitely think that you can actually have it all. And a lot of people actually, at the end find themselves teaching. You see older people many times find themselves even, it can be in very short experiences. It can be, I don't know if they change their career completely, but older people with a lot of experience have, things they can give. And you do see, occasionally I see, both in the high school level, in the elementary school level, and in the university level, people, shifting. So I think that's the beauty of this era, I would say. It was not like that like 30 years ago. I would not think that people would be able to jump like that.
Right.
So I think you're in a very good time.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I must tell you, having all these aspirations means that you are going to be an avid learner.
I hope so.
Yeah,
I hope I never stop learning.
Yeah.
Learning is genuinely what makes me happy. I came out of the army and everyone went to travel, and I done that. I got really lucky that I was able to travel around the world as a high schooler and as an elementary schooler and middle schooler. And I just knew that I needed to go to university. I knew that I wanted to learn again. I wanted to have tests, and I wanted to get research papers, and I wanted to write papers, and I wanted to do math, which is crazy, but it's true. So I know that it will always be an aspect of my life, no matter what I do, which is kind of cool. It's cool to have that background.
Yeah, we have, and I think today there's many more opportunities. In the past, you would invest in 1 degree, maybe 2 degrees. Then you had to like work, and today, with all the online learning, you can actually learn as you go along all the time.
My mom made a point of from moving from country to country to learn the language.
Okay.
So my mom is the best example for me of someone who was constantly learning. She moved to India. She learned Bollywood dance because it was a part of the culture. And she comes from a chemistry background completely.
Oh, wow.
Super quantitative person, completely quantitative. She's like, I want to learn Bollywood dance because I'm in India and I want to learn this culture. And she learned Hindi. And then we moved to China and she learned Mandarin. And then we moved to Thailand and she learned Thai. So she's the perfect example to me of someone who doesn't stop learning, is always learning, is always taking classes, is always trying to become a smarter, more educated, more academic version of herself. And she's the most academic person I know. So really? I think that's,
What does she do?
Right now, she's a Bollywood dance teacher. So
are you serious?
Yeah, look
that's
how
so exciting.
Look how
that's
things change. Yeah.
But what did you do earlier?
She was a mom, and I think from her, I saw, mom is a full-time job.
It is.
I was so lucky growing up because I always took like math classes, and my mom was so good at math. So even in high school, like IB math, science, chemistry level, she would sit down with me and teach me everything. I would come back from school and she would sit with me on my homework. She's such a smart, educated lady. And she took that as her profession. Her job was when we came home, first of all, to take care of everything in the house, but also when we came home, we had her full undivided attention. She would help us in school. She would take us to soccer games. She was a mom, the best mom, the best mom. No, genuinely, I have only love and admiration to give her. And she really is the smartest woman I know. And I think people who meet her as well, they always say about her, like, your mom's a genius. I know. I have so much to live up to. So, yeah.
That's exciting because I think not a lot of kids of stay-home mom would be able to appreciate all these skills because they're not exposed to it so much. They, they see the mom around the house and they take it for granted that she's, washing the dishes and making sure that everybody's happy, but they would not be able to really appreciate it. So it's wonderful that you are.
But I think her additional aspect was the homework part, right? Because we knew what she was doing around the house, but that wasn't so much where we felt her. We felt her when we would come home and she would sit with us for 3 hours until we understood why this chemical equation is the way that it is and why it works. And my friends from high school would come to my mom's house and we would do study sessions to our house, and we would do study sessions with my mom. So she would go over and explain the work. And I remember at some point, my sister and I were like, Mom, you need to become a teacher.
Yeah.
And she was like, it's too early. She can't wake up at those hours. 7 a.m. is too early. So
today she can do Zoom.
I know.
She can adjust the hours. Maybe she teach in another country that, have the hours that fits her.
Well, what you're saying is, like, life is long. She says that too. She says right now, it's not something that I'm interested in. Maybe one day. She has so many more years ahead of her. Maybe she'll make that change. But my mom was super academic and she taught me to be that way too, which is kind of cool. Yeah.
That is so nice to hear. Really, as a woman, I'm even like deeply touched about that.
I hope to be a mother like her, and be able to teach my kids. If I'm learning because my kids are learning, that's another example of learning all the time, right? Like relearning math, relearning chemistry.
I have a 13-year-old son who wanted me to help him with science, and I just realized that he have learned things I did not learn. And I was so frustrated. I couldn't help him unless I would just take the time now and teach myself and then help him. And I didn't have time because I'm like a working person. So luckily his brother helped me. I was so happy about that. Right. But yeah, absolutely. That's definitely a thing. But I'm very happy that you're talking about with this passionate about education. I'm like, this podcast is about that. I think education is like the biggest asset, I really think, of anybody. So, and that's, it's true that I'm sort of from the education industry. So it sort of maybe sound like not genuine, but it's really genuine. That's how I feel. But tell me, El-ly, are you working now? Do you also have a job?
Yes.
Oh my God,
I'm actually an English tutor.
Student. Oh,
an English tutor and a math tutor. So education encompasses my life all the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Who do you teach?
I teach at a Smart Center. It's called Smart Center, Beramat Sharon. It's a center that teaches kids from ages 5 and 6 all the way to bagruyot, and even adults who want to come in and learn English. So they teach English. And then all the bagruyot subjects. So I teach English and math from very young levels to bagrut, which is pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Yeah. So you already started your teaching career.
Yeah, I'm working on it slowly.
That's exciting. And this is, how did you find it?
My friend was working there and I told her, I love this idea. I want a job that will make me happy. To be honest, it's not an adult job yet. I have a lot of friends who are doing like jobs in the financial sector right now or who are working at high-tech companies. I'm not there yet. I think next year, hopefully I will be. But this was kind of a job of passion. I said, I need to make a little bit of money being a student. I would love to do it doing something that makes me happy. So I'm a teacher for English and I love these kids. I have like repetitive kids that come every week and it's the best.
Wow, they're so lucky to have you. Really.
Hopefully.
I really do think so, especially
you.
with your, with the fact that you are a native English speaker.
Yeah.
I can tell you that today Israel has become much more international, especially here. I think due to Reichman, by the way, was bringing so many international students here. I think it's really such an opportunity for young children.
Thank you.
Wow,
yeah.
That's exciting. And I think you should totally follow your passion. I think with really talented people, if they follow their passion, the money comes too.
Yeah.
It's sort of like I don't think you should give up anything.
Thanks.
Hopefully
you're right.
I totally think you should have it all. Don't think you should choose. I think one of the problems, I think the way people think about it is you need to choose.
Yeah.
You don't need to choose. You need to carve your way to find where you feel very comfortable, happy, and, with your talent and human capital that you must develop. There's no, by the way, I don't think there's any shortcuts here. You are able, I think, at the end to also translate it into money.
Hopefully you're right. It's funny you say that at some point you feel like you have to choose.
Mm-hmm.
I have a host family who I love, who took me in while I was a soldier, and I'm still a part of their life. And they have a young girl.
Mm-hmm.
She's 6. Her name's Gali, and she's wonderful and the best. And I remember asking her, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she said, well, I want to be a ninja, princess, astronaut. And I said to myself, she really thinks she can have it all.
Why not?
And she can. And for some reason, when we get older, we think that we can only be one thing. And what you're saying is so true. She wants to be a myriad of things, and she's going to accomplish whatever she wants to do because she's such a smart kid. But I think it's so cool how at a young age, you have this mind of I can do everything. And it's sad that over time that kind of minimizes. But I always think about that when I think, what you said right now is you really can do a lot more than you think you can. I always think about Galgul, and she always tells me, she's like, I want to be a princess, ninja, astronaut. And I say, I can do that too. I can be in the finance sector and a professor and a teacher. And so it's kind of cool.
I totally think you can.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think with the development of both technology and health, people just have longer time, and they're people today in the 60s, 70s are really in a good shape.
Yeah.
There's still this crazy retirement age, but sometimes makes no sense.
Yeah.
And that's why you have longer opportunities. Anyway, so what do you think would be the future of university? Given the fact that now we can do so much stuff online, why do we need even the university?
I don't know what the future is.
Mm-hmm.
I know what I would want it to be.
Okay.
I would want to show up to classes. I think Zoom is a great tool,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not the whole picture.
Okay.
I think
In what
showing
way?
up to classes, there's so many more aspects of university than just tests and learning. There's the social aspect. There's the networking aspect. There's the going to class and getting a coffee right before aspect. There's many more aspects of university that just aren't solved by Zoom. I think Zoom is great. I love Zoom. I love waking up to a message from a teacher being like, guys, there's no class today. You're on Zoom. I get to make my breakfast slowly. I get to have my cup of coffee. I'm happy when there's Zoom, but I don't think it's everything. And I think that's why you see so many kids, students, still coming to university, although everything's on Zoom. Right? Because everything's hybrid right now.
Right.
But so many people are still coming to class because there's a different human connection that happens in class between me and the professor, between me and the other students. Also, the conversations flow much more, right? Because I can have a quick word with somebody next to me if I didn't understand, or I can look at someone else's notes to make sure that ours are the same and that we're understanding things in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if university will be like that forever. I really hope it is. I hope that there's some way to make things hybrid, just like Reichman does so well. But if everything turns on Zoom, I think we will not have as successful people and as academically driven people. I also think psychologically, I'm not a psychologist, I don't know, but I think psychologically there's something about going to a place to do something else, going to a different environment to do something else in that environment. I think when everything's confined to your home, everything becomes a little bit more difficult, and everything kind of becomes how do you say that word? Let's say mixed up. Everything becomes kind of mixed up because my bed all of a sudden is also where I do Zoom. It's all of a sudden where I read and where I watch TV. And then it no longer becomes a place of sleeping. And my living room no longer is a place where I sit with friends. It's also a place where, right? So everything kind of becomes confused. And I know in terms of sleep, for example, I had to learn recently that you can't do everything in your bed because then you have a harder time sleeping because your brain doesn't automatically turn into I'm going to bed, I'm going to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
It's I'm going to bed and I can do a myriad of other things while I'm there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it's great to have different environments for different things. I think going to school to learn is great and it puts your mind in the learning mood. And going to bed to relax is that. And going to the couch to sit is, I think that's important. And I think if everything was on Zoom, we would have a different feeling and different atmosphere
That's
around
really,
education.
I must say it's really an interesting point of view. It's sort of like it's related to, there's a lot of all kind of, I don't know if it's psychological ideas that say, how important is your space for your well-being, like psychological well-being. I think the whole Marie Kondo revolution, can you imagine, a woman who comes and just, organize people's houses and help them get rid of things because of the clutter. I must say, every time I see it, I'm like amazed that people got into this situation. Not that I'm different. I also got into this situation, but this is something, that we have succeeded to accumulate so much, so much of everything that we now have to get rid of it and organize our space. Otherwise, we're not happy. So you're basically saying that I want my space for learning. It has to be separated from the other, activities that I do. But also, I think the human aspect is like, I must tell you, I feel it's huge, and I really want to understand in what way. Like, why do I feel so much better when I'm in class versus Zoom? It's like something I cannot, even explain to myself.
I think part of it, as a student, I don't know how it is as a professor, but as a student, I know that sitting next to two people next to me and people in front of me and people behind me means that I can't linger off. I can't all of a sudden think about something else because everyone around me is learning, so I better be learning as well. That's the first thing. So there's less distractions in that way. You would think that more people, more distractions, but actually more people, less distraction because you're all watching one thing. You're all looking at one thing. That's the first thing. I think second thing, it is really that aspect of, I sit next to Maya and Jareth. We like that space. And always I'm turning to Jareth. Wait, did you get that? Did you understand? Oh, this way. Okay, right. Maya, did you? Oh, okay, right. And we do that with each other. So if there's ever a space where I did linger off for a second, I can come back very quickly. On Zoom, you're kind of in an empty void. If you don't understand something, you have to catch up by yourself. Here, you're allowing the human connection to fix your problem. I also think, wow, there's so many elements to this. I think after class, just seeing our friends and like having a short walk to the coffee, to the karnaf, it's great because you also talk about what you learned in class. I think that that's underrated. I don't think people realize that when students leave class, they still talk about what they learned to a certain extent, right? Because you can also build analysis. For example, right now we're learning macro, right? And there's been a lot of discussion about crypto in class, but we don't have time to get into all of it because we have a curriculum, we have things that we have to do, we have a syllabus. But after class, right, I'll be like, hey, Michael, what did you mean by what you said about crypto in terms of sanctions, in terms of Russia and the US? And he gets to elaborate. And then I learn more, something that I wouldn't have been able to do in class. Whereas there's no situation in which the teacher leaves the Zoom and I hang by and I say, hey, Michael, right? It doesn't happen. So that's another aspect of learning that I think learning comes in all different shapes and forms. And elaborating on learning comes after class more than anything else. And going up to you after class and being like, hey, Yael, that was really cool. By the way, I saw this TED Talk. I thought you would like it. I would never do that if we were on Zoom because it would be weird to stay back and be like, hey, Yael, by the way, right? It's much more comfortable to come up to you. I think those are all aspects of learning that don't exist in the Zoom world. And innovation is so amazing that maybe they'll be able to do something that will make you feel like you are in class. And
like metaverse.
Yeah. And all those parts of life will be there. But, even when you say metaverse, I was talking to my grandma about this yesterday, that I think the metaverse, while it's so interesting, I can't imagine myself sitting at home all day and being in a virtual world. Because I like to move. I like to feel. I like to be there. I like to feel this, right? That doesn't exist on the metaverse. I don't think it really will. No matter how realistic it will be, it won't be the same. I don't know how to explain it. I just feel it. So that's what I think about the future of education. And I really hope that this hybrid way keeps happening.
Yeah, I think it will. I mean, I personally, I sympathize. I think you articulated in a very interesting way. You nailed it into specific points where I did not think about it in the past. The only thing I did feel that I'm just much happier when I see eye to eye and not just, Zoom to Zoom. And this happiness gives you a space to learn, I think. So that's personally, I would say, my take. I'm continuing to exploring it with all my podcast guests. It's so exciting.
That's so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I will finish here because it's going to be long, even though we really enjoy this podcast. Maybe we'll do it 2 parts, El-ly 1 and El-ly 2, because she has so much to contribute here.
I just love education. It's really cool to be able to talk about it and talk about the future of learning and my personal experience with education, which really is to a certain extent different and lucky and privileged. So it's very cool to be able to do this, Yael. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you and privilege as well. And thank your mother.
I will.
Who I become now a
and
huge
my
fan
father
of
and my
her.
father,
And
both
your
of them
father,
amazing people.
No, you were, your mother, the teacher, and your father who took you around the world with his career. I think it's a really unique experience. I'm very happy you had it.
I will send this to them and tell them this is the thank you note to both of you.
Yeah, exactly. And they should spread it around the world to all these places. Absolutely. Excellent. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Yael.
Thank you, everybody, for being with us on our podcast, The Future Economist, the podcast that talks about education and economics and the future of education. If you like the podcast, subscribe to us on YouTube, on Spotify, and other platforms you are familiar with. We are everywhere. From Reichman University, the Raphael Recanati International School, the degree of Business Administration and Economics. I'm Dr. Yael Hadass, and thank you so much for being with us.